First rule of the channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of the channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the 2024 fantasy football offseason preview for the Green Bay Packers. And basically, like when in doubt, go with the cheapest option. That's going to be the rule today. In this one with the Packers, like not all those teams that we think are going to take that leap forward are going to do it. Because, and I have this pulled up, like as much as I'm expecting that the Packers, who there theoretically are like 50 to 60 yards a game and 10 points a game that they could take that step forward on, we're also expecting that the Houston Texans are going to take a step forward and the Bears are going to take a significant step forward. Like not all these teams are going to get clustered together in that like elite or sub-elite category. Some of these teams are going to have to fall down, and we're looking at you, Cincinnati Bengals. Maybe we could have predicted that last year. Maybe we couldn't have. Some of those teams are going to have to like move up. Some of those teams are going to have to move down. And again, when we're looking at some of the stuff when it comes to the Packers, like it may just be better to just like err on the side of caution and go cheap. Have them not hurt me, then try and reach and have them hurt me. In particular, we're talking about like Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs and Christian Watson. When we deal with those things, we'll talk about Dontayvion Wicks, probably going to be the best guy out of this entire bunch. So last year with the Packers, they were 12th in passing yards. We're expecting that to go forward. Rushing yards, 112, 15th overall. Expecting that to go forward. They Aaron Jones left, went to the Vikings. They brought in Josh Jacobs. And then 22 points a game. We're expecting that to go forward. The Packers last year were somewhat inconsistent as the season went on. They did make a run in the playoffs. Like we're expecting some good stuff out of them. Like that's the main thing. So I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer when it comes to this. Remember, they don't care about your fantasy football lineup. They care about winning leagues. So last year with the vacated opportunities in the backfield of Aaron Jones, you're looking at 142 carries, 656 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. The bigger thing that we're looking at is there's 5 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. And I have the snap shares pulled up. So week 20, the playoff game where everybody's healthy, yeah, you're looking at 5 wide receivers and 2 tight ends that are going to be rotating out there. They don't care. And if we can't figure out who's going to get the significant opportunities, like the the high value opportunities, and how much guys are going to be on the field, because they have the luxury to try and win football games by just throwing everybody out there and saying like, you can't figure out our tendencies because we just use guys interchangeably. That's probably what's going to go on with the Packers, which is bad from a fantasy perspective. Good from a real life perspective, but they don't care about your lineup. So just remember that. So moving on, we're going to talk about like these 3 guys. Like Romeo Doubs is probably going to kill any opportunity for the pass receivers to be fantasy relevant, because his role in the offense is going to be red zone target guy. So he was 10th overall. I can bring this one up someplace when it comes to red zone usage right here. So you see Romeo Doubs, he's like number 10 overall. So Michael Pittman, Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice, DK Metcalf, the Sun God, Tyreek Hill, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Adams, and CeeDee Lamb were the guys that were above Romeo Doubs when it came to red zone targets. So that's the tier of guys that he's in. And if they're going to be running him as their red zone target and he's on the field 80% of the time, it doesn't matter. And that's going to hurt. Also, Josh Jacobs, a theoretically ability to have a ceiling, because Romeo Doubs is going to get about 8 touchdowns, even if he's like only going to get about 700 yards. Again, with Josh Jacobs, with him coming in, if we're expecting like significant increases in guys like Christian Watson, the tight ends, Jayden Reed, something along those lines, if Josh Jacobs is improving on the 2 rushing touchdowns that A.J. Dillon had last year, this one right here, if we're expecting that these rushing touchdowns, like 4 went to Jordan Love, we'll talk about him a little bit later, 2 went to Jayden Reed, 2 went to A.J. Dillon, and 2 went to Aaron Jones. If Josh Jacobs, is in that range of like 10 to 15 rushing touchdowns that we're expecting him to do, like other guys are not going to get it, especially in the receiving corps. So they're going to need to take that large statistical jump forward. And we'll talk about Jordan Love, being able to take that next tier. Like I would be betting the under on the 4 rushing touchdowns when it comes to him. But overall, like he's going to have to be that guy, the league MVP that we're talking about with Jared Goff the other day. Like he's going to have to do like 40 rushing or 40 passing touchdowns to go along with about like 4,500 yards to a 5,000 to make a difference overall. Because if we get the over underline on about like 4,200 yards passing and 32 touchdowns, like the toys just don't matter. And even if we get that a significant step forward when it comes to the rushing game with Josh Jacobs coming in, it just may not matter from the receiving standpoint, the passing standpoint, from a fantasy perspective. All right. Moving on to Jordan Love as the quarterback. He is my quarterback 10. He's going quarterback 10 overall, 72 on Fantasy Pros on Underdog, Best Ball League. We're just trying to get an idea of how everybody's going. He's going quarterback 10 with an ADP of 91. I like that a little bit better. But I, in general, do not like Jordan Love this year. And then the other thing to look at, Jordan Love, he's going 78 overall, quarterback 9 on ESPN. So to break this down real quick, and I have the blue guys highlighted, is and then the green ones here also. If I'm going to pull the trigger on Jordan Love at any point in the draft, and I can't stack him because it looks like the best guy that I can be stacking him with is going to be Christian Watson. There are just other guys that I should be going out there and attack to win my league. Now, yeah, is he a punt? Sure, absolutely. Like, I'm not expecting him to have a bad year. I'm just saying, like, at this point, if I'm pulling the trigger on like 91 overall Jordan Love, yeah, I probably should just be jumping up and getting a Jayden Daniels or Caleb Williams because of that theoretical rushing upside. So I have Jordan Love in college. You're looking at like freshman year, 165 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Junior year or 2018 year at Utah State, you have 63 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. Final year at Utah State, 2019, you're looking at 175 yards, no rushing touchdowns. He's a 4.7 guy. This is a likely going to be a statistical outlier. Yeah, maybe he can call his number in the red zone. I'm going to pick the under. I'm going to say it's closer to 247, significantly higher than what we've seen it before. Like, I did like his athletic ability coming out of college. They want to win football games. They don't care about your fantasy football upside. So if we get that drop down to like 150 yards rushing and like 2 rushing touchdowns, that just doesn't matter anymore. He's going to have to get at least an equal amount of production increase in the passing volume, but that's why they brought Josh Jacobs in. So just remember that, and that's why I have this ESPN thing. Like, at this point, having to pull the trigger on Jordan Love, I'm going to play quarterback chicken, and hope that somebody else falls to me, because Justin Herbert, Jayden Daniels, Kirk Cousins, Caleb Williams, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and our boy Jared Goff going like quarterback 21 at 197 on ESPN are going to have the equal to or greater upside than Jordan Love goes at 78 overall. Now on ESPN, absolutely, Kyler Murray should be above him because of that rushing upside. If they don't have that rushing upside, it just doesn't matter. You're not trying to win your league at that point. There'll be other guys to be going at. It doesn't matter how nice they look on paper and how much of a significant statistical increase that they're going to have. It's just not going to happen if they don't have the rushing upside. There are other guys to go with, and there's not even a point to try and stack him, because the best guy to try and stack him with is going to be Christian Watson. So again, I'm going to be like letting someone else in my league take a Jordan Love and taking my shot someplace else to win that league. That's just how I would look at it. Now, the other 2 guys, Sean Clifford is the only guy who took snaps last year at quarterback. I don't know anything about him. They did bring in Michael Pratt, 7th round pick out of Tulane. I thought he could develop to be a very good backup quarterback in the NFL this year. If Jordan Love goes down, like, we're going to probably have problems in general when it comes to the Packers and their toys. Moving on to the running back room, they brought in Josh Jacobs at $12 million a year. The out is after this year, but they're basically going to pay him like 1 year, $24 million. His efficiency was down with the Raiders. We can talk about whether or not that's like all the wear and tear he's put on his body at this point. He is going to be 26 this year. More than likely with Josh Jacobs, it's a combination of that wear and tear and how bad the Raiders were on offense for most of the season last year. So a slight increase with Josh Jacobs. Yeah, you're probably looking at something along the lines of like 250 carries at a 4-yard clip, close to 10 touchdowns. The bigger issue with Josh Jacobs is, yeah, he can pass block, he can catch the football, design passing work. With a good offense, he's going to have a lot of red zone opportunities. So yeah, probably the over underline on total touchdowns is going to be closer to like 15 touchdowns that I'd be looking at with him overall. And then it just becomes an issue of price. So for me, he's my running back 10. On Fantasy Pros, he's going running back 10, 31 overall. On Underdog, you're looking at running back 11, ADP of 42. And then on ESPN, he's going 31 overall, running back 15. I like the running back 15 a lot better than I like 31 overall. So the idea behind this is he's going to be risky, at this range, because yeah, you have a theoretical upside, a guy attached to a good offense that can be a bell cow. The other thing is, like, yeah, he could just really be inefficient and end up being in a timeshare with the 3rd round draft pick, Marshawn Lloyd. And I'll bring this one up. So this is going to be the bigger issue with him. And this is why I say, like, when in doubt, just go cheap. Now, Marshawn Lloyd, I don't have him ranked right now because he's a priority cuff. That means that the guy who drafts Josh Jacobs has to disproportionately value Marshawn Lloyd, even though Marshawn Lloyd as a lottery ticket is probably capped out as an RB2, because I just don't know if they're going to end up giving him the high value opportunities, because he may not be trustworthy as a pass blocker. So he's not going to get less design passing work because of that. That's probably part of the reason why they brought AJ Dillon back in. So with Marshawn Lloyd, like, yeah, he's going to be one of those guys in like the 13th round of my draft that I'd be throwing a dart at, but it's probably going to be other guys I'd be rather throwing the dart at. And because of the possibility of that inefficiency with Josh Jacobs, unless he's just falling down the board, like I don't know how to take advantage of this backfield at price. And I really like Josh Jacobs in this backfield. It's just going to be a problem that he's going to have to fall far enough down my board for him to be valuable enough that he could end up being in that like 800 rushing yards, he could basically do what he did last year, 800 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, like 37 receptions, 296. Like that's what he could end up doing in a split backfield with Marshawn Lloyd, even if the Packers offense is good and there's a lot of red zone opportunities. So at this point, like, you're probably better off. I would be better off, throwing that lottery ticket, Marshawn Lloyd. Fantasy Pros, he's going running back 53, 159 overall. Underdog, running back 44, 143. And then on ESPN, he's going 165, running back 49. So again, this is a guy that I would feel much better taking in the last round of my draft, but there's going to be guys I like a little bit better, like your Blake Corums, that I would be rather throwing that dart at than maybe getting a split backfield with Marshawn Lloyd. And again, the bigger issue is going to be AJ Dillon. And if we get the thing that we don't want, but it happens, and we'll talk about the fact that we do want it, is that Josh Jacobs goes down. AJ Dillon is probably going to be taking those Amir Abdullah high trust value reps over Marshawn Lloyd at that point in that offense. All right. So moving on to, and I do have this bring up, Marshawn Lloyd is going to be special in a way that, or athletically special in a way that Josh Jacobs isn't, even as Josh Jacobs is a better football player. 4.46 guy at 220, does get out in space and look really good as a receiver. So I could definitely see that. Like, this is what bothers me more than anything else, is his role in the offense is likely going to increase as the season goes on, and they feel they have more trust in what they can expect him to do when he's on the field. And again, that just turns the Packers into a better football team. It turns them into a worse fantasy team. So I can't even put Josh Jacobs on my anywhere on my draft list right now, because I think there's too much risk involved with him doing what he's doing with Marshawn Lloyd in there as that third round draft pack. All right. So wide receiver room. Christian Watson, this is probably going to be the closest thing to a league winner who's not named Dontayvion Wicks. So in this case, Christian Watson, you are looking at the possibility that you're going to get this like high efficiency season, like Nico Collins, 109 targets, 80 receptions, almost 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. And that was in 15 games last year. Like, the big issue with Christian Watson is going to be health. He's only played 23 games in 2 years. He has, I wrote down like 14 touchdowns in 23 career games. Like, this is the guy. If it's a good offense and you want the best guy on the good offense, it's going to be Christian Watson, and he's going to be relatively cheap. So he's my wide receiver 33, because I got to bake all that risk into the reward of you getting like a wide receiver 1 or such a big boom bust wide receiver 2 that he's going to win me all those weeks, because I don't have to rely on him being consistent in that flex role or that like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. Like, that's what you're looking at with Christian Watson. So my wide receiver 33, he's going wide receiver 45 on Fantasy Pros, 103. So this is just like, I don't care. I can just throw my dart at him. On Underdog, he's going again with an ADP of 81, which is wide receiver 46. And again, this is a best ball league, is wide receiver meta. This is why he's up so high, is he's going to win people weeks. And then finally on ESPN, he's going like 91 overall, wide receiver 40. And again, this is probably about the range that he should be getting his, you should be punching your ticket on him. And I hate to put it like this, but I would probably be wanting more pieces of Christian Watson at 78 overall than Jordan Love, because Christian Watson's got a better chance to win me a league than Jordan Love does. That's how I would look at it overall. So probably with injuries, you're looking at that over underline. If I can pull up the right one, you're looking at over underline like closer to like 800 yards and like, flirting with like 8 or 10 touchdowns. If you get a full season out of him or close to it, yeah, like 1,300 yards. And this is a guy that's only going to get like 6 or 7 touches a game. You're going to have these massive spike weeks. And the cost that he's going at, he is undervalued. That's why I just moved him up to wide receiver 33. Like the same process of winning a league, lose your league at this price, going in this range. And I'll bring up the ESPN one again. Like that would be my biggest thing to look at. Like Christian Watson is trying to figure out this range. He probably should be closer to like the 60s because of that upside, even though there's a lot of risks to it. Because at this range, like the draft ADP doesn't matter. I have to be able to take advantage of other people's mistakes, and outside of a certain range of guys, and we'll talk about like your Trey McBrides, your Jonathan Brooks, Dalton Kincaid. There's less and less guys that can win me leagues, and then I have to push those guys up that have the ability to win leagues higher and higher over all the other guys that are just going to clog my roster or be replacement level guys. Like that's how I would look at it. So the same thing with like Jordan Love. Hey, he's probably a little bit better in the 90s range, but I can push him down further because I can get the same production. I can't do that with Jordan Love. There's only going to be so many guys that have that road to that like Nico Collins type of season that he had last year. Christian Watson is going to be one of those guys. All right. So we already talked about Romeo Doubs. Very capped. He's going to be flirting with wide receiver 3 just because of his role in the offense is going to be about like 80% snaps, 8 touchdowns because he's a red zone target, and only about 700 yards. Like that's probably what I'd be expecting him to have next year. And that all that does from a bigger perspective is eat into your Christian Watsons, your Jayden Reeds, and your 2 tight ends and your Josh Jacobs. That's what it does at this point. So I'm going to talk a little bit about their snap shares a little bit later, but for the time being, like you can see that Romeo Doubs last year, I mean, he's the number 1 wide receiver on the team when it comes to snap share. And week 19 and week 20, these playoff games, like he was on the field 70% of the times, 81% of the times. I don't necessarily think that's going to change next year, especially because like that's the guy that they want to run and that's the guy they want to target once they get in the red zone. So expecting that to change. I have him pulling this one up. I have Romeo Doubs, Jayden Reed, and Dontayvion Wicks. I moved Dontayvion Wicks all the way up. They're my wide receiver 59. Until I can get clarity on what these guys' roles are going to be in the offense, that's where I would see them all being. They're all going to be that wide receiver 3 range. They're probably going to all have fantasy relevant weeks. And unless you get lucky and you pick that week, overall, like you're just not going to know. So that's why I would put him there. He's going 129 on Fantasy Pros, wide receiver 53. On Underdog, he's going wide receiver 53 with an ADP of 109.6. And then on ESPN, he is going 175, wide receiver 61. And again, that like just remember that's why you're going to have that massive disparity, because like I don't see a way that he gets more receiving yards, but I can see a way that he's going to have relatively the same amount of receiving touchdowns. Now, the guy that I think is way overvalued when it comes to the wide receiver room is going to be Jayden Reed. So last year he finished with 793 yards and 8 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns in 16 games played. He is, again, my wide receiver 59 combined with Doubs and Wicks. He's going wide receiver 34, 73 overall on Fantasy Pros. On Underdog, he is going wide receiver 33 with an ADP of 57.7. And then over here on ESPN, he's going at wide receiver 41 with a overall 92. Here's the problem. When we look at these snap shares, even when Jayden Reed was healthy, when everybody was healthy at the end of the season, week 20, he did 61% of snaps. So he's also competing with snaps with either Tucker Kraft, the tight end, or Luke Musgrave, the tight end. If Romeo Doubs is the number 1 by snap share, we're asking, is Christian Watson going to be the number 2 by snap share? So when he was healthy, week 7 to week 13, you're looking at like 70 to 80% snaps for Christian Watson. That would make me think he's going to be on this field. Christian Watson is going to be on the field the number 2 amount of times when it comes to the wide receivers. At best, Jayden Reed's going to be on the field in that like 60 to 70% snaps rate, like a high of 78 in week 8. And you're going to be looking at a lot of other weeks where he's going to be flirting with 40% snaps. So he has to, again, be very efficient in an offense where he's only going to be on the field like 50 to 70% of the time. The other thing is, like, they brought in red zone competition when it comes to our buddy Jayden Reed and Josh Jacobs. So in order for Jayden Reed to take a significant step forward, that means Josh Jacobs is a bust. And for Josh Jacobs to return on his investment, that means Jayden Reed is probably going to be the bust in this offense. Overall, something to be thinking about. So in this case, with Jayden Reed overall, like I don't even know if he's going to end up being a consistent wide receiver 3 in this offense, because we're going to talk about like Dontayvion Wicks. He's the guy to go out and get overall. Like if you don't like your Christian Watson shares, the guy to go is Dontayvion Wicks, and maybe you get an injury. Maybe he ends up taking that Romeo Doubs role in this offense. Like probably none of these guys outside of Christian Watson, like that high efficiency type of season, are going to win leagues. So that's what makes me not as interested in Dontayvion Wicks. I moved him up slightly because there is a little bit of a hype train going on with him. It's not so much that I do think that he should be really moved up, but I think he should be in the range of draftability at this point, because there is that theoretical option where Romeo Doubs just disappears from the offense. I don't think that's going to happen because of his role. And then Dontayvion Wicks slots in there, and he potentially could project to being less of a high efficiency guy and more of a volume based guy, which from a fantasy perspective, I like more, because that gives me more shots at the apple than just like, these type of weeks with Christian Watson. We could see week 10 where he does 7 targets, 2 receptions for 23 yards. You're going to have that with Christian Watson in a way you wouldn't have that with Dontayvion Wicks. So that's how I break these guys down. Finishes off with Bo Melton. And go back to the snap share. So he starts picking up he was drafted by the Seahawks. He was cut. He gets signed by the Packers. I'll bring this one back up. And at the end of the season, he's doing like week 17, 9 for 6 for 105 and a touchdown, 7 for 5 for 62, no touchdown. He scored a touchdown in the playoff. The reason why I bring up Bo Melton is if Jayden Reed goes down, they're just going to have a plug in Bo Melton to Jayden Reed's spot. And the other problem is, if Romeo Doubs goes down, they're just going to plug in Dontayvion Wicks. If Christian Watson goes down, they're going to plug in Dontayvion Wicks. There's a hard road to figure out how we actually get a lead winger outside of these guys are just going to all be interchangeable within the offense, and none of them are going to be really fantasy relevant. That's the end of the day. So, if I want to jump up and take a flyer, that lottery ticket on a league winner, it's going to be Christian Watson with those injury concerns. If I don't want to do that, I'm just going to throw like a 13-round draft pick on Dontayvion Wicks and hope that they've talked about him being quote unquote Davante Adams like that. Those are the two ways I would look at it. I don't see how Jayden Reed is really going to get out of wide receiver 3 range, and I don't see how Romeo Doubs gets out of wide receiver 3 range at this point. We need like multiple injuries, and we haven't even talked about the tight end room yet. We get over the tight end room. Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, they are my combined tight end 28. And I don't think it matters. Tucker Kraft is dealing with like a torn pec. He's not going to be ready until camp at this point. If I were to split these two guys at this point, Luke Musgrave would be up at like wide receiver 17 because of the injury. That's where he's going on Fantasy Pros. 148 overall. Tucker Kraft is going tight end 22, 170 on Underdog. Luke Musgrave is tight end 17, 153. Tucker Kraft is tight end 28, 208. Going over to ESPN, you're looking at Tucker Kraft going 207, tight end 23, and there's Luke Musgrave, 215, tight end 24. Like, it doesn't matter. Best case scenario, like you're probably looking at these guys doing about like 50% snaps between the two of those guys. We go back to the snap share at the beginning of the season with Luke Musgrave. I mean, he's up to like 88% snaps. This is when I thought he was going to be a league winner. I'm just waiting for the tight end or for the rookie to turn the corner. He gets hurt, lacerated kidney, and then we see Tucker Kraft jumped up to like 96% snaps, 100% snaps. The last week of the season, week 20, the playoff game, Tucker Kraft is doing 85% snaps. Luke Musgrave is doing 28% snaps. Now, the Underdog guys broke these down like really well, and then I'm just gonna like plagiarize them real quick. Luke Musgrave is probably a better every down tight end. He has flexibility to be moved around the formation. He's not going to be the blocker. Tucker Kraft is the blocker. He's the Y. And it really comes down to like how the Packers want to deploy these guys. And this is where it gets worse from a fantasy perspective between these two guys is, if they want the every down tight end in Luke Musgrave on the field, they can decide that week to week. If they want the blocker on the field, they can decide like, hey, this is the week we're going to give Tucker Kraft like 90, 100% of snaps. Oh, this is the week that we're going to give Luke Musgrave like 90, 100% of snaps. We're going to be in 2 tight end this week. And that means that like we're going to get what's his face? Jayden Reed is going to be at like 30% snaps this week because we're in, two tight ends, 90% of the time. That's what you're looking at when it's trying to break down the Packers this year. So at best, between Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, like even if a guy gets injured and we're like, oh, that's the starter, he's going to get 80-90% snaps at tight end, he still has to compete with 3, 4, 5 guys in the passing game between Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jayden Reed, Dontayvion Wicks, and Bo Melton. And then it gets even worse because, they went out and they signed Josh Jacobs. Part of the reason why they brought in Josh Jacobs is to be the red zone guy and get red zone opportunities. So in order for Josh Jacobs to return on investment, you're looking at the tight ends in particular, because that's where tight ends get a lot of their fantasy value is red zone opportunities, not getting theirs. Oh, and they already have a guy whose basic job in the offense is red zone opportunities, 10th overall red zone opportunities for wide receivers, Romeo Doubs. So anyway, I think that's about all I got when it comes to the Packers. And about the only guy I would somewhat be interested in to win me a league is Christian Watson.